Hello there, and warmest greetings to you. Welcome to this episode of Just a Few. My name is Patrick Antoine, and I am glad that you are joining me on this platform, which allows me the opportunity to present biblical responses to questions from people just like you. And as always, I give you the opportunity, if you have a question, or even if you want to just make a comment on a particular video. But if you have a question and you'd like for me to attempt an answer to that question, please feel free to submit that question to me, preferably via email. The email address is on the screen, and I will try to provide you with a response as soon as possible. Today's question is from the Old Testament book of Exodus, and it deals with the confrontation Moses had with not just Pharaoh, but these men who were called magicians in Pharaoh's court. And so the question is, someone wants to know this: how did the Egyptians or the Egyptian magicians match Moses's power? Very good question. And if you're not familiar again with the story of Moses and this confrontation, the series of confrontations with Pharaoh, it's found in Exodus. Today I'll be focusing on a few passages very quickly. Time goes by very quickly in my responses. I realize I'll be looking at Exodus 7 as well as Exodus 8. And so the first three confrontations between Moses and Pharaoh resulted in the magicians in Pharaoh's courts doing the exact miraculous manifestations that Moses and Aaron did. And so that's where the question arises: where did they get this power from? How did they match Moses' power? Of course, I mentioned to you, it's only in the first three miraculous manifestations were they able to confront or to challenge Moses' power, duplicate it. Let's see those three incidents very quickly. I can see how quickly I can read. Exodus 7 verses 8 to 12. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, when Pharaoh speaks to you, saying, show a miracle for yourselves, then you shall say to Aaron, take your rod and cast it before Pharaoh, and let it become a serpent. So Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh, and they did so, just as the Lord commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. But Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers. So the magicians of Egypt, they also did in like manner with their enchantments. Notice that word, you'll see it in all three cases. For every man threw down his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. Moses had to add that bit there for us to let us know. Then the second confrontation is found in verse 19 of chapter 7. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, say to Aaron, take your rod and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the streams, over their rivers, over their ponds, and over all their pools of water, that they may become blood. And there shall be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in buckets of wood and pitchers of stone. And Moses and Aaron did so, just as the Lord commanded. So he lifted up the rod and struck the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh and in the sight of his servants. And all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. The fish that were in the river died. The river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink the water of the river. So there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. Look what happened. Then the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not. So the Egyptian magicians did what is called their enchantments, and some waters turned to blood also. And then in the third instance, in chapter 8, verses 5 to 7, then the Lord spoke to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your rod over the streams, over the rivers, and over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up on the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. Here's what happened again. And the magicians did so with their enchantments, and brought up frogs on the land of Egypt. So they can do the same miraculous manifestations as Aaron and Moses had the power to do. And that gave rise to the question, where did they get their powers from? How did they do that? Notice, however, by the time the fourth manifestation of supernaturalism came from Moses and Aaron, which was now in chapter 8, verse 70, they could not duplicate it. Their powers were limited. Verse 17 of chapter 8 says, and they did so, Moses and Aaron, for Aaron stretched out his hand with his rod and struck the dust of the earth, and it became lice on man and beast. All the dust of the land became lice throughout all the land of Egypt. Now the magicians so worked with their enchantments to bring forth lice, but they could not. So there were lice on man and beast. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, listen to what they said, this is the finger of God. Pharaoh hardened his heart. What did they mean by this is the finger of God? Surely they were saying, what these guys are doing, Aaron and Moses, is from God. So then where did they get their power from then? That they had to acknowledge that the power that Moses and Aaron were, let's use the term, tapping into, was from God. Well, you should have an idea now where this power is coming from. One, is not from God, because even the Egyptian magicians, with their limited power to duplicate what Moses and Aaron were doing, they themselves had to acknowledge the power that Aaron and they had was from God, not the power from these magicians. And there are only two sources of supernatural power, from God or from Satan. There are satanic powers and satanic blessings. You hear people talk sometimes about black magic and white magic. White magic meaning things that you could use supernaturalism to supposedly accomplish good ends, good means, good things. Be very careful with that. The power for white magic or doing these supernatural things is not from God. Not everything. Let me just say three things here from these incidents, even though it wasn't asked this way, but I think these three things would help you to understand why it's so dangerous to follow people who are into supernaturalism, thinking that everything they do is from God. One, not everything supernatural is from God. That's what we see there. It wasn't from God. Those were not servants of God in Pharaoh's court. Their supernaturalism came from another source. So, one, not everything supernatural is from God. Two, God's power may be challenged, but it will never be overcome. And there are people who will do things supernaturally, and they will challenge the Bible, faith in Christ, and so on, but they will not overcome God. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome it, John chapter 1 tells us. And finally, those who engage in evil supernaturalism. Yeah, there's an evil supernaturalism, because not all supernaturalism is from God. There's evil supernaturalism that can be used to produce good results in our eyes that seem good. Those who engage in evil supernaturalism do not have the power to reverse their deeds. So notice each time Moses' power was challenged, whether it was the rods of the serpent, they could not get back their rod and turn the serpent back to a rod. They could not turn the blood in the river back to water. Moses could have done that. And they could not remove the frogs from the that was stinking all over Egypt. Moses had to pray for that to happen. And sometimes a person might think, well, I'm desperate, I'm in a difficult situations, and I need to go to one of these people today, these modern people who use enchantments, whether it's a psychic phenomena being used or whatever form of witchcraft or sorcery, necromancy, and you're desperate and you go to those people and they may help you. I'm not denying that. They may tell you if you lost something, where to find it, or bring back some loved one, or whatever it is they might tell you they could do. They cannot reverse whatever they do. Keep that in mind. And if they open your soul to some form of spiritual bondage or some form of invasion of evil supernatural power, they cannot reverse what they do and what they expose you to. Keep in mind who had to reverse everything. Moses, the servant of the true and living God. So keep those three things in mind. Where did they get their power from? Not from God. There is satanic power known as evil supernaturalism. When Jesus was tempted in Luke 4 and Matthew 4, Satan was willing to offer Jesus anything he wanted. just bow down and worship me. And as long as you're willing to bow down and submit your soul to the devil, he will manifest some form of goodness to you, whether it's fame, power, money, all types of things. He has the power to do it. Don't think Satan doesn't. He has. But it's evil supernaturalism. And that's where some people, even today, get that power from. Beware. Run from it. Even though they might be able to help you, it opens you up to bondage. And it's only the true and the living God can set you free from the type of bondage they bring you into. They themselves can't set you free. My name is Patrick Antwine. Thank you for the question. Hope my response helped in some way. So until the next time, grace and peace be multiplied to you.